We've heard some feedback that the way that Gloss's integrations work isn't as intuitive as it could be. So I am hoping that this little explainer video helps make it a little bit clearer. We are also going to work on making the user experience a little bit better, so you don't need to walk through a video, but this is just for now. Because we have a lot to cover, I am splitting this video into two parts. In this video, we're going to cover Meet, Teams, Slack, and Jira. In part two, we're going to cover Gmail, Outlook, G Drive, and OneDrive. So let's start big picture. Why do we even have integrations in Glossa? Glossa is your single source of project truth. We use your meeting recordings, RFPs, SOWs, SOPs, everything about a project to create comprehensive, clear, and accurate requirements for your project. The more project context we have, the better the requirements. But, of course, we don't expect users to manually upload every relevant conversation or file to a single project. No one's going to do that. If people were already doing this, half of the need for Glossa wouldn't exist. So instead, we have built out these integrations to common workflow tools so that your project data flows directly into Glossa without any extra work from you. That way, all of your project context lives in one searchable place, and Glossa gets all the information that it needs to create great requirements for you. So what integrations do we have? For meeting tools, we have Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. For email, we have Gmail and Outlook. For drives, we have G Drive and OneDrive. For messages, we have Slack. And then finally, we integrate with Jira. In this video and in part two, I'm going to go through these one by one, including how to set them up and how they work. Before we dive in, let's start with some basic setup that applies to all of the integrations. You can see all of the integrations in your org by going to the Integrations tab. If you are the owner of a Glossa org, which means you're the person that is the admin or the person who created the org, you're going to see every integration that's supported by Glossa listed here. As the owner, you get to choose which integrations are available for the users in your org. You make an integration enabled for the users in your org by using this slider. If it's on, that means that anyone in your org can use that integration. If it's off, then no one in your org can use it. If you're a user rather than an owner, you will only see the integrations that an owner has enabled on your Integrations tab, so you won't know what you're missing. Once you've decided what integrations to enable, then it's time to start connecting. This basically means that you're authenticating your account so that you're connecting your Glossa account to your Google account or your Microsoft account or your Slack account. We use Pipedream, which is an integration as a service provider, to authenticate for most of these integrations. It's a security best practice that we're following, just as we follow all industry best practices for data privacy, protection, and trust. Let's dive into each of these integrations one by one. Let's start with meeting tools. We will start with Google Meet. Our Google Meet integration automatically grabs all of your recorded meetings that are relevant to a project and then adds them to the project in Glossa. Let me explain in more detail. First, we look at your calendar, your Outlook calendar, or more likely your Google Calendar, and we grab any meetings that include someone from a client organization at one of your projects. So let's say you're doing an implementation for Pause for Change, and your contact there is Vanessa Torres. When there's a meeting on your calendar that includes Vanessa, Glossa will grab that meeting and then add it to the Pause for Change project. It doesn't matter if you're hosting the meeting or if Vanessa is hosting it or if Vanessa doesn't even show up, we're looking at the invite list. And to keep it simple, we used Vanessa, but most of the time, you're going to be working with more than one person at a client organization. As long as you have listed those people under clients in Glossa, then we'll look for them on the invite list too. So if there is anyone from that client contact list that you have in Glossa that's on the invite list in your meeting, we're going to grab that meeting recording. One other thing that is very important, you have to record the meeting. Otherwise, we are not going to have anything to grab. We don't have an AI attendee join meetings. We've gotten a lot of really clear feedback that people don't want that. So instead, we're just using the recording. That means you have to record it. One question that I often hear is, what if I have an internal only meeting about the project? Will Glossa know about that and will it add it to the project for me in Glossa? And the answer is no. We are only grabbing client-facing meetings. We don't know enough about how your company works internally, and we really don't want to go pawing through all of your internal meetings to confidently decide that a meeting is relevant to a project. That's not for us. If you do have an internal meeting that is relevant, you're going to need to add it to Glossa yourself through a manual upload or through Drive, which we'll talk about in part two. Another question that I hear, does this go through your meeting history? And the answer is no. We're only going to grab meetings going forward once you set it up. So if you want to add historical meetings, you'll have to add them manually. Once you connect your Google Meet account, you don't have to do anything else. It just automatically works for every project. It's a set it and forget it type of integration. So let's go through it. Let's go through it together. From the Integrations tab, I click Connect, and this opens up a window where I authenticate to my Google account. Very important. If you get a message that says that you can't authenticate, email me and I will fix it for you. We're still waiting for Google to approve our app. So some people will get this message. They should be approving it like any day now. So this won't be an issue, hopefully, by the time you're watching this video. But just in case you do get it, let me know and I will fix it for you quickly. And then that is it. You're done. You can test it out by adding a meeting onto your calendar with a client contact and then watching when the recording gets added to the Files tab in your project. Note, every single Glossa user that wants Glossa to grab their meetings needs to do these setup steps, connecting their specific Google Meet account to their specific Glossa account. If you have multiple people on the same team who are all in the same meeting, you don't have to worry about us grabbing it multiple times. We're just going to grab it once and we'll add it to the project just once, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, let's move on to Microsoft Teams. Teams is very similar. You connect once with your Teams account, we check your calendar for meetings that have a client invited, and then we grab those meeting recordings and we add them to your project. A question that I get sometimes, can you have both Meet and Teams enabled? Yep, there's no problem with that. We'll just grab whichever one is used. Let's go through it together. From the Integrations tab, I click Connect. This opens up a window where I authenticate to my Microsoft account. And there's a couple of little guided steps here. And then, just like GMeet, we're done. The next time I have a Teams meeting added to my calendar where someone from my client contact list is invited, it'll automatically be added to my Glossa project. And remember, you have to record your meetings for this to work. Okay, those are our two meeting tools. Next, let's move on to Slack. Slack is our newest integration, live as of late December 2025. We know that decisions get made, context gets shared in Slack all the time. But we also know that there is a lot in Slack that you don't want to send to Glossa. So we have a handy Glossa bot. Let me show you how it works. First, we authenticate, just like the other integrations. This is a one-time step. You do it once, you're all set going forward. You authenticate directly. Next, we need to map channels to projects. So if you have a Slack channel that's about a specific project, choose that here and map it to the Glossa project. You can map multiple channels to the same project. So if, for instance, you have an opportunity channel for the sales team and then a delivery channel for the services team, both can feed into the same Glossa project, so you always have all the context that you need. Next, make sure that you have added GlossaBot into those channels, and then it's really easy. You just tag GlossaBot into conversations to send those conversations into Glossa. You can tag GlossaBot in a message directly, and we'll take the content of that message and send it into Glossa, or you can tag GlossaBot in a thread to capture the whole conversation up to the tag. You'll get a confirmation message from GlossaBot, and you can check to see the Slack conversation in files in your project. And then finally, we have saved the most complex integration for last, which is the Jira integration. All of the integrations that we've talked about so far are for getting project context into Glossa so that we can create good requirements for you and be your single source of project truth. But what happens when you've finished discovery, your requirements are good to go, and you want to send them to developers? That's where our Jira integration comes in. In order to set this up, you are going to need a project in Jira to map to your Glossa project. So let's walk through it. So first, we're going to go to our Integrations tab again, but this time we're going to click on the Downstream tab. And here we see our Jira integration. We're going to go ahead and click Connect, and that's going to authenticate us to our Jira account. Next, I'm going to choose which Jira project I want to configure. It's very flexible, so you can set up your configuration per project rather than for the whole org. We're going to walk through the configuration for my Pause for Change project, and I have a couple of options. First, I choose my project, then I want to choose what type of records do I want to create in Jira. Do I want to create these requirements as stories, as tasks? I'm just going to choose stories. Then I get to choose what do I actually want to send from Glossa into Jira. Here's where it can become a little bit confusing, and I want to spend a little bit of time explaining this. we have three tables that we have the option to sync: requirements, acceptance criteria, and tasks. We can choose any combination of these to send over to Jira. Let's start with the simplest example. If I just select requirements, all of my Glosso requirements will be written into Jira as stories. So we'll have one requirement in Glossa maps to one story record in Jira. Pretty straightforward. If I choose acceptance criteria only, then each acceptance criteria in Glossa will write to a single story in Jira. So I can have multiple ACs for a single requirement in Glossa. Each of those ACs will become a story in Jira. So essentially, one requirement will be represented by multiple stories in Jira if I choose ACs. And finally, if I choose tasks, a task in Glossa will write to a story in Jira. So if I have one task that is associated with three requirements in Glossa, that will be represented as one story in Jira. Essentially, we want you to be able to choose the content and level of detail that makes the most sense for you and for your project. Again, this is projects. I think the thing that's confusing about this design, and I take full responsibility for this, is that it's not clear what happens when you have multiple ones selected. So I want to be really clear about this. If you have only requirements selected, requirements are going to be sent from Glossa into Jira. If you have requirements and acceptance criteria selected, acceptance criteria will be sent from Glossa into Jira. If you have requirements, acceptance criteria, and tasks selected, tasks will be sent from Glossa to Jira. You can think about it as a graduated line where the thing that's furthest on the right is the thing that will be sent. I know this user experience is confusing. We're going to make it better. In the meantime, I hope this video helps. So once you've selected your tables to sync, you will see that the next step, mapping your fields, changes accordingly. So if we just have requirements, then the fields are going to display requirements fields. If we choose acceptance criteria, the fields will represent AC fields. And if we choose tasks, the fields will represent task fields because that's what's being sent into Jira. I've chosen requirements. Now I'm going to choose how do I want the fields in Glossa to map to the fields in Jira. And we have this very configurable because we know people create a lot of custom fields in Jira, so you can choose how you want to map your Glossa fields. I'm just going to go with really basic mappings of summary and title and description. Last, I have a setting at the bottom that says, do I want these updates to sync? If I say yes, then every time this requirement is updated in Glossa, it's going to send that update to Jira. This is really helpful if you're doing a lot of work in Glossa and you want that to be represented in Jira. It is not so helpful if maybe you're doing work in Jira and you don't want it to be overwritten. So this is up to you whether you want this to happen or not. And again, this is on a per project basis. So you can have different settings for different projects. You can always, of course, change this on or off later. Okay, so we've set up the configuration for this project, but now we need to map this project to the Jira project, right? This is just the configuration for the pause for change project, but we need to go do an extra step, which is the mapping. In order to do that, we have to go to the Projects tab, and then there is a column for Jira, and we're going to click Map. Here, we're mapping the Glossa project to the Jira project, and so we're saying this Glossa project is now going to get all of the configuration settings that we just defined for that Jira project. Then we're not done. We've mapped the project successfully, but nothing is going to flow. We need to individually choose which requirements get sent to Jira. We can do this in two ways. First, we can go to the requirement record itself and click Send to Jira. When we do that, the status will change to Sent to Jira, and then we can go into Jira and we can see that it was created. It was sent over successfully using the configuration that we had defined. Sometimes you may not want to send requirements over one by one. That might take a lot of time. And so we think that the best way to send a subset is by going through categories. So if you go in Glossa to your categories, you open a category record, you can bulk select requirements, and then you can choose Send to Jira. And again, This is going to respect that setting of will it be updated, will it not be updated, is this a point in time send, or is this something that will be continuously updated? That's up to you for your configuration. Okay, that's it. Thanks for going through this part 1 video with me, and I hope it was helpful. Just a quick recap, we covered Google Meet and Microsoft Teams, which are set and forget. You authenticate once, and then we automatically grab your meeting recordings and we add them to your projects. We covered Slack, where you map channels to projects and then you tag Glossabot to send messages and conversations into Glossa. And finally, we covered Jira, where you configure Jira project settings, you map Glossa projects to Jira projects, and then you send Glossa information into Jira. If you have any questions or if you run into any issues, obviously email me directly. And if you want any other workflow tools integrated with Glossa, I want to know about that too. Thanks for being a Glossa customer. Stay tuned for part 2.